YouTube people, welcome to our Periscope and our anchor.fm/GabSmacked and our YouTube podcast. Hello from New York. G'day, good to see you. Whilst I also am on my exercise bike, burning a bit of calories, it's a pleasure to see you all, and to see you all is always a pleasure. You can get the replays on periscope.tv/anautist, ANAUTIST. And if you go to Twitter @anautist, you can get all of these published. You'll see the Anchor FM podcast link, you will see the YouTube link, and of course, well, I don't know if you'll see, is this live? Your phone just started talking. Very cool. So isn't it great? And also I'm going to burn some calories, ladies and gentlemen. We've already done 20. By the end of this, it might be 100 or 200. And then once I hang up with you all, we pedal hard, get that fitness up and feeling great. Good for stress, good for the Tourette's, good for depression, good for getting anger out, good for it all. So we walk in, ladies and gentlemen, to our Wednesday Wisdom. Our beloved GoFundMes are all here and our Patreons are here. Good to see you all. Thank you as always for believing enough to join us. Always great to see you. You need to do that. Now, by no longer having to worry about other people, I will talk about that in a sec. What I have learnt, because we were doing a recap of everything that happened last year and the very stressful and tumultuous time without having a Wednesday Wisdom, and learning to draw on what I have learned, what we have learned together through past Wednesday Wisdoms. And one of the beautiful things that I drew on was that I did not have to feel responsible for other people as I have been desperate to feel my whole life without being aware of it. And becoming aware of it over the last year, we've spoken about this before, has freed me from being the one who needs to deliver a lot of what I believe people need if I can help them, etc. Because we established last year that sometimes to help other people, it's actually better to get out of the way for someone who can help them better than you. So sometimes it's better to let someone you love go if you know that down the track that there is a very good chance of them meeting someone who is able to love them more than you can, and in a way that they need in terms of the mental capacity or whatever it is that, or what you like, what you don't like, where you see your future, etc., etc. And that doesn't mean that you are failing your responsibility to them. What it actually means is that you, by extension, are actually delivering upon your responsibility, because by moving out of the way to let another human being who thinks differently, yes, who can look after that person even better than you can, or they can even look after themselves in a way that would free you from being burdened by the guilt of thinking that you're not helping them. Because if you have that guilt, then you are driven by that guilt, you're held hostage by that guilt, and then you try to help someone, and in fact helping them could make their life even worse because of opportunity cost. You could be in the way of them discovering a friend who can actually help them in a lot better way, in a lot more efficient and a successful way. That other person could have more time, more of an inclination. They might have more things in common with that person. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a relationship in terms of a romantic one. It can be friendship, can be your professor, your teacher. And this is something I felt I needed to do since I was a kid. I felt that I had to befriend my teachers, the ones who seemed lonely, which was quite unusual. So I said I didn't have to worry about doing that anymore. Now, the doc said, actually, what you've done there is created a boundary between myself and other people. And that is one of the major things, as I spoke about last year in 2018, people with autism have a big problem with boundaries because of their lack of theory of mind. And for those who are new, last year we spoke about theory of mind, which is the ability to understand how one appears from other people's perspectives, as well as understanding how they would perceive a situation if you were them. And that's something that with autism it's almost impossible to do. Now, I have been able to logically or replace that lack of intuition with logic. So with a lot of training and a lot of input. So the first thing I have to do, which is in my calendar, imagine how someone else feels. Imagine, you have to try and imagine. Now, I can't actually imagine it, but what I do is I run through the logic and say, if I had that assumption, then it would make sense that I would behave in that way. I don't understand how someone could have that assumption. So you would naturally, as an autist, without meaning to be, become intolerant, because you just absolutely can't accept that someone could think in a different way. But all you have to do is actually grant yourself that acceptance. You just have to say, okay, let's assume that someone thinks that Santa Claus is real, or that, you know, they like meat pies. I don't know, it doesn't matter what it is. If you imagine that someone likes meat pies, even if you physically don't like them, then it would make sense that they would want to buy a meat pie, for example. So you can do the logical progression. And that's something that I've had to do with many, many, many years. Interesting. Dibbler just says you can't open a door of another through coercion or persuasion. Well, I think we might define persuasion differently. Captain Deltron, our beloved, says, wait, Santa isn't real? Everybody, Captain Deltron is the ultimate, I shouldn't even say troll. He's transcended trollness. He's just way too good. All right. So this boundary is something that is lacking with the autist, which I've now come to understand. Now, one of the problems with the word boundary is that in my head, I always, up until today, pictured a boundary as sort of like a circle around a person, like an avatar. And as they walk, there's a boundary that follows them. And I have come to realize that that's not what's going on, because the brain, the autist brain is taking it literally. Whereas what I've come to realize after today was the fact that I can let someone else deal with their problems knowing that it'll be done better than if I intervene is itself the boundary. So now when I use the word boundary, I now picture that concept, which I've just written about now, by not having to worry about other people directly. So by knowing I don't have to help someone else directly, and you're going to realize I'm now going to contradict myself subconsciously, and we'll get into that at the end. That's the twist. I don't have to help someone else directly. It actually ironically frees me up to be able to be more productive and be more of a net benefit to society, and therefore helping people even more. Thank you very much. Next, intellectually, I know that by freeing myself of the obligation to be there for others, I'm actually allowing them to grow and become their own people, even though I still feel like a cold-hearted bastard for doing it. But intellectually, I know that that's actually not correct. That's an emotional reaction because of something that happened growing up. And that's partially to do with autism, partially caregiver, partially like everything. There's always many variables, which is why I think that a lot of the things that I say, people say that they're universal. I do see that now. I understand that you can have different variables that lead you to the same sort of outcome, which would be called convergent evolution. Just why hyenas, even though they're from the feline family, look like dogs. All right. So it's the right thing, and it's a liberator to allow me to become a much better person and them to become a much better person. Okay? But it takes a couple of years for things that feel wrong to filter down into the emotional brain, I guess you can call it in layman's terms. So I know that by not getting involved sometimes, it's actually frees up that person. So had I known this in the past when I was a professional, I guess it would be similar to a counselor. So a counselor is deliberately not supposed to get involved. Yeah, someone just said neurotypicals don't get a lot of what I'm saying yet. And that is one of the beautiful ironies about Wednesday Wisdom, which is the fact that I was so disadvantaged and so, when I say disadvantaged, intellectually disadvantaged and incapable because of the autism, it has a rebound effect, which it forced me in order to survive to develop these skills. And then so ironically, you end up developing these skills, you hyper-develop these skills. That's exactly right, yeah. And that normally happens a lot. People have to hit rock bottom. It's sort of like someone who drinks alcohol in an unhealthy way might not deal with it, but someone who's obsessively alcoholic and is almost going to die then is forced to deal with it, and then they become one of the best reformers and helping other people get off their alcohol addiction, for example. So it's something like that, yeah. Now, it takes a long time for it to filter down into the emotional brain, and I called it a too slow and a dumb bugger. Interesting. So I naturally feel that I feel this conclusion of aggression if I'm not directly involved in helping people. It's almost like by pushing them away, it's an act of aggression. That's how it actually feels. But feeling, that's why I said feeling and intuition are not a good sign of what's right or what's wrong. We think it is, and that's the problem. The problem is that we feel like intuition works. And that's because sometimes it does, but we make the correlation that somehow because it works sometimes and therefore it's correct. Well, the problem is that when you're wrong so bad that you might not get a second chance. And so intuition really, I've come to learn now, is not the way to go. And I can talk more about it in future scopes, which I will once things are released in public. So, reminder, the doc said to me that it's a significant achievement that I was able to go through one of the hardest months of my life last month, which I still can't talk about. And thank you. I'm getting some lovely comments on Periscope. Don't forget on YouTube to write your comments in there. You can always update and correct these things. Let me get back to this point, but I just have to say, in one of my last scopes, I said that 75% of the English words, even though English is a Germanic language, the words are of French origin. That's not correct. Ignore that. Okay. Hello, Dr. Samira. Everyone follow Dr. Samira. Don't be sorry, my friends. What I was saying was, I lost my train of thought there for a sec. Sorry about that, everybody. What was I saying? Oh, yes. It's actually 45%, but if you add Latin words, because obviously French came from Latin, so if you add Latin and French together, you get 56%. This was made clear to me by someone called Ichabod, and I don't know if they deliberately called themselves that because Ichabod was the son of Phineas, who was not necessarily a good guy, written in the Old Testament, and the last name, it was Ichabod something, which also has significance, I can't remember, and they called themselves Willy Wonka. But then at the end of their message, obviously their need to correct me was from an emotional point and partially resentful, because they said, you have good ideas, but they're not always based in facts. And that comment itself was not based in a fact, because that comment was just slid in at the end as sort of a kick you when you're down type of comment. But that's cool, because I don't think that person was actually aware that they were doing that. And I still appreciate the fact that they emailed me to let me know that I was incorrect on the fact that it was 45% and not 75%. And yet, at the same time, the fact that I said that English had a French overlay but was Germanic in the same way that Lebanese is an Aramaic language with Arabic overlay, and Maltese is an Arabic language with Italian and English overlay, that was my point. So my idea wasn't destroyed by the fact that the number was off. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Now, moving on. Reminder that it is a significant achievement, the doctor said, that I was able to go through the last month, which was one of the hardest months of my life, and without his help, because he was not there. And I was able to do that by drawing on all of the past Wednesday wisdoms, which got me through it with almost no assistance, no doctor, no extra medication, nothing. I was able to do it with sheer willpower and survive beautifully. And he said, do not underestimate that level of achievement. And that's the lesson from there, I think, that we can all learn, is that we can underestimate how many great things we do when they're not pointed out to us. And we only think of the negative things, especially if you're highly sensitive to negative emotions like many of us are. And then you always remember, damn it, I shouldn't have done that. Damn it, that was wrong. Damn it, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Oh, and you keep living these past memories over and over again. And the thing is, they've already happened, and they happened once. They happened once. What's the lesson you learn from it? As soon as you learn the lesson, write down the lesson, forget the memory. That's one of the techniques I had to learn in order to function. And over time, it makes a dramatic difference in how much you can achieve in a day. I also now have implemented a calendar. So before my calendar, I had a task list and a project list. Project showed all the projects I want to achieve, and a task list was everything I had to do. Was that by my choice? Choice with a lot of therapy, yeah. So thank you very much. And where was I? Now I've developed also, thinkers have this problem, exactly. I have also developed a calendar. How do you forget the memory? Okay, someone just asked, how do you forget the memory? Let me hold that thought and I'll answer the calendar thing first, and then I'll get to that. The calendar is what I draw the tasks that I have to do into my calendar, and my calendar is a guide, not a dictator. So I look at my calendar and I think, how am I going to get all of these tasks I want to get done into my day? Well, what I do is I put them into my calendar drip by drip across a 2-week period. And now I don't have to worry because they're there, and I've left a lot of gaps for other things that happen. And then when I do other things, like this Wednesday wisdom, which I didn't plan, I put that into my calendar and then highlight it green because that means I've done it. And then I move what I was going to do today into another day. And so I still have achieved. And when I look back, I feel like I did achieve that day. And so I wasn't wasting my day. Now, someone just asked, Ruby asked, how do you forget the memory? Okay. So what you do is you have to ask yourself, either with yourself or with your therapist or your family friend or Gandalf the Grey, whoever it is in your life that you have. And if you don't, find one quickly. It took me 20 therapist to find the right guy. So it takes a long, long time. And you've got to get good at knowing how to look for them too, and knowing how to speak with them and everything else. But you forget their memory via this. Well, this is how I was taught and how you do it. You try to figure out why that memory triggers embarrassment, anger, humiliation, resentment, whatever it is that it triggers. And once you figure it out, and normally you need someone else to bounce your ideas off, and it has to be in a sort of a safe space where you can say shit that's going to come out wrong. It's going to come out completely incorrect when you first try to articulate your thoughts. And the other person has to be completely understanding of that. And once you figure out what that memory is trying to teach you, as soon as you write down that lesson, that's the lesson you put in your calendar, which I do. I put these in my calendar and I repeat them. For the first 6 months, I'll repeat them maybe every day, and then after a couple of weeks, every week for the first 6 months. And what happens is that I then subconsciously associate the embarrassment with that lesson. And so the memory loses its power. Because I think before that, your subconscious is possibly trying to tell you that you need to learn something from this memory. And that's why that memory keeps coming back at you. But once you learn that lesson and it's written down, the memory loses its power. And then you don't worry about it anymore. Sometimes it'll come back, oh, I remember that time I did that dumb thing. Okay, it was done. I've learned my lesson. And then you move on from it. That's what I would say. Now, let's see what else. What a great tip. Write the lesson down and forget the memory. Exactly. I love that. Yes. You replace the memory. Exactly. Do you also keep a form of journal? I do. I have many journals. And I might even read a part to you right now, which will be in my second book. Are you ready? I think you're ready. All right? This is a sneak peek into the second book, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? The disease is the world. The cure is confinement. Mental torture created from annihilation of sanity. By walls covered with murals of an island paradise one can never visit. My body aches for a shower, but gravity seems much stronger. And so the morning had me crouched semi-comfortably underneath my desk. The courtyard where I'm sitting brings glimpses of sun, a flicker of numbness against the pain of existence. So these are the type of things that I write. And that was after the mental health breakdown that I had when my lawyer explained to me that I actually did do something legally wrong, which I wasn't aware of. And I had that breakdown. So for 5 days I was in there and I wrote a lot of the journal, which will come into my second book, The 5-Year Exile. And it would probably be the second half of it, which is called Transcendence. I don't know if there'll be 2 separate books yet. We'll see how big they get. Let's look at our next comments. You say colander, like I say colander. I get told that all the time, even by people in Australia. Why don't you say calendar? Why do you always say calendar for? Do you think you're British? All right, you think you're a palm, do you? All right, so let's move on. Reminder. I'm glad I returned the PC. Okay, so I bought a PC last year because I really, really wanted to get something. And I knew that I had no need for it. And so when I got it, I decided to return it because I realized that my want for that computer would die, right, so quickly. However, the value of the computer would die even more quickly. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to hold on to it and then regret paying all this money for a computer that is now worthless and I don't even want anymore. So I'm going to return it. And I did. And it feels amazing because I still have my stuff that works and I'm very happy with that. So that was something second I wanted to add. Now, next. Here's the twist. It turns out that after saying that I wasn't going to worry and not to be responsible for other people, halfway through my therapy session today, I had nothing else to talk about with the doc because everything was okay, despite how difficult things had been the last month. And the doc said, well, you have another 15 minutes, right? So it's not halfway through, but anyway. So I said to him, well, why don't you bring in the next guest? And he said, whoa, stop. Why did you feel the need to bring in the next guest? Excuse me while I bring my Anchor podcast back. And I said, crap. I was embarrassed to admit it, but I said, actually, I was worried about his time. And he said, isn't it interesting that even though you openly and consciously said that you were now no longer worrying about trying to take care of other people because you know that they can handle themselves, you went and did the exact same thing. And I said, but I wasn't conscious of it. And he said, exactly. It was unconscious. And that's the whole point of having someone who can call you out on that, so that you can see that it was unconscious and it becomes conscious. And it keeps getting pointed out until such time that you are aware of it almost all the time. So that you are not just aware of something consciously, but unconsciously. Right? Or that the things that are unconscious that are not affected by the conscious knowledge are brought into the conscious sphere so that they are affected by the conscious knowledge. And that's one of the beauties of the freedom of speech. And this is not, I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean in a human sense, in that we, in our group of friends or wherever it is that you feel that you're in some sort of safe space, you can say something, because the chance that what you say is stupid is going to be pretty high. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Speaking, it does not come through the conscious mind for a lot of the part. A lot of the time, it's an unconscious production of knowledge that is coming from a place that exists subconsciously or in a subconscious space. And so when it comes out of your mouth, sometimes you're hearing it for the first time everyone else is. And so the chance that you get it wrong is there's a very high chance for that. And so it can be corrected by other people because they have a different temperament and a different bias and a different blind spot. And then you can do the same with them. And this is one of the things about us being a social species, which is so ironic that someone with autism is talking about that. But I am obsessed with understanding humans, very much so. It's almost like studying advanced chimpanzees. In fact, it's exactly what it is. So I felt the need to bring in the next person to talk to him, because I recognized that my value to him was tied in the information that I provided, which was incorrect, because by me being silent, it actually allowed him to make an observation about me. And he finds that interesting. So he said, actually, it's my job to do this. I've already booked in my hour to see you. You don't have to try. I've already conceded that I will be in this conversation with you for an hour. You don't have to be interesting or uninteresting. And funnily enough, as I said, that was where the most interesting point came out. I'll get to chats in a couple of minutes. Now, we were able to trace this back to when I was a kid. Now, in my case, it was autism related, because it was very hard to establish relationships with people. And I have memories of people coming to see my parents and my parents themselves who would leave, and I was desperate for them not to leave so I could have some human contact. And I didn't know how to keep them. And so I ended up developing skills to make myself very interesting to other people so that they would not leave. And that was a flashback that I had there that I completely forgot about. And that actually was psychological transference, because that desire became subconscious, because it went into the conscious of my child mind. And as I grew up, it came along with me for the ride. And so even on bloody GabSmacked, it felt that I had to provide information to be feeling of value to other people, which is absolute crap, because on Gab Life, I have almost as many followers, and Gab Life is deliberately set up to not talk about anything and just look at food and laugh and look at scenery and all that crap. And yet it's still interesting because other people decide if they want to be interested in you. It's not for you to be in control of that. It's for you to be a better person for yourself, to be better than you were yesterday, to learn more for your own self, to be more content, to feel of more benefit, to find your meaning, your peace, etc., etc. All right, so I'm going to stop the YouTube video first. And it was a pleasure to see you all at YouTube. And don't forget to take life one smack at a time. Boom.